In 1973, crooner Bobby Darin went in for a routine dental checkup, but it all went very wrong. After a rush of doctors, emergency surgery and heartbreaking phone calls, Darin was dead at the age of 37, and it was all his fault. Bobby Darin had a life full of triumphs and mysteries. From his humble beginnings and bone-shaking family secrets to his meteoric rise as a singer and actor, it was one wild and tragically short ride. Bobby Darin was born Walden Robert Casotto on May 14, 1936. When he was just 8 years old, doctors diagnosed him with multiple bouts of rheumatic fever, which seriously damaged his heart. The medics painted a grim picture, predicting a short life expectancy for the boy. Because of Darin's precarious health, his family absolutely doted on him. They called him the king amongst each other and pampered him to within an inch of his life. As a result, he grew self-absorbed and selfish. With the sense that the Grim Reaper was always at his door, along with his family's unfailing adoration of him, Darin soon developed a burning ambition to make something of himself. As a top-performing student, he said that his peers used to tease him and make him feel insecure, and that's why he gravitated towards a career that made him feel better. Darin's lifelong dream was to be a musician. There was only one minor issue: his name. The way Darin picked his last name was pretty random. Supposedly he got it from a sign in a Chinese restaurant. The sign was faulty, so instead of saying Mandarin Duck, it said Darin Duck. Unfortunately, life didn't quite go as Darin planned, at least for a while. One recording after the other, he failed and failed. Still, he was resilient and curious, and in 1958 that resilience was rewarded. He recorded a song called Splish Splash, which sold more than 1 million copies in the blink of an eye. Darin's breakthrough had arrived. He wanted to keep pace, so he began collaborating with other newcomers to get inspired and hopefully have more hits. It seemed like fate was doing its thing, and then it steered him into the company of someone special. Her name was Connie Francis, a then up-and-coming singer. Francis and Darin were meant to write songs together. At the time, both of them were famous but not superstars. Together though, they had a supernova effect. They started spending every minute together, and not surprisingly, their artistic match quickly turned into a romance. Francis noted that Darin was the love of her life, and apparently there was nothing he could do to derail that. In fact, she once found him in bed with 2 women, and didn't bat an eye. Bobby Darin was used to getting what he wanted, and he wanted to marry Connie Francis. Knowing that her father hated him and would never approve, Darin suggested they elope. The problem was that Francis was a daddy's girl, and when one day her father physically threatened Darin and chased him out of a building, she knew that it was either her father or Darin. She called time on the relationship, and this hurt him deeply. Darin wanted to be larger than life. He spent countless hours in the recording studio obsessing over every note and lyric, striving for a flawless performance. His attention to detail was legendary because he wanted to be legendary. In 1956, Darin made his TV debut. He scored an appearance on the Dorsey Brothers stage show, and this marked the beginning of his multifaceted career, and made him even more arrogant. He had a reputation for being a little bit snobby, and it was about to cost him a dear friend. He felt, acted, and lived like a legend, yet some of his old friends didn't like his attitude. One of them was another legendary musician, Sammy Davis Jr. Fed up with his attitude, Davis told Darin, "Let me know when you stop being a legend so we can be friends again," and walked out of his life. Even though some of Darin's friends shared the same feelings as Sammy Davis Jr., others felt differently. For example, George Burns, who gave Darin his first chance to perform, knew that beyond his bravado, Bobby Darin had a heart of gold. Since Darin lost many friends due to his arrogance, he began spending more time with Burns. As time passed by, they formed a kind of father and son relationship. So when Burns' life took a painful turn, Darin was the first one to lend a helping hand. In 1964, George Burns lost someone very close to his heart, his wife, and was significantly depressed. That was when Darin stepped in. Burns said that Bobby slept in his bedroom with him for 3 or 4 nights. Darin was a miracle worker when it came to solving other people's issues, even though his own problems were kind of alarming. Not content with confining himself to a single facet of the entertainment industry, after his TV debut he ventured into acting, eager to showcase his talent on the big screen. And he was good at it. He scored a huge project called Come September, a movie where he shared the lead with the iconic Sandra D, an innocent girl-next-door type of actress who became a household name before Darin. Little did he know, he was in for the ride of his life. According to Darin, it was a mutual attraction, but Dee told a very different story. According to her, Darin was nowhere near charming. In fact, she thought he was very arrogant and didn't want anything to do with him. But Darin wasn't willing to give up. After all, he'd gotten everything he ever wanted in his life up until this point. He wooed Dee's mother and turned her into his wingman, asking her to convince Dee to go on a date with him. It was a good plan, and surprisingly, it worked. Darin finally scored a date with Sandra D. He planned a carriage ride with her, and their first date was a total game changer. It was clear that Darin was falling in love with her dangerously fast, but the shocking part was that Dee began to have feelings too. At the end of the date, Darin's honesty and sincerity won her heart. In no time, the two became lovebirds, flirting and laughing all over the set. By December 1960, the two wanted to get married, but sadly, this heady honeymoon phase would be the only silver lining of this doomed marriage. On December 16th, 1961, the couple welcomed a son, Dodd Mitchell Darin. They were a family of 3, but sadly, little Dodd just missed the happy family train. He had 2 very problematic parents. In the Dee and Darin household, the good times were officially over, yet Darin didn't even realise it. He was still living the party life and expecting his wife to join in too. Their son later recalled that Darin expected Dee to be ready for every occasion and every party with the boys. Dee began complaining because Darin began treating her as a trophy wife rather than a partner and a friend. She was sick of sitting through shows and then waiting for Darin to come home after he went partying with the guys. Sandra D began feeling trapped, so she picked up a bad habit. Darin and Dee's messy marriage had stupefying consequences. They were not only harming their lives as a married couple, but their professionalism as well. They did everything in their power to mess with each other, and once in a while they crossed the line because, in Dee's words, they were bored. While Darin emotionally manipulated Dee and often reduced her to tears, Dee eased her pain with a bottle every night. Wanting to retaliate, she would often find ways to criticise Darin's looks. She would demoralise Darin and tell him his toupee was crooked before he appeared on shows, just to stir things up. Darin often obsessed over Dee's relationships with her co-workers. Since they had fallen in love on set, what was to stop her from having an affair with another one of her co-stars? So when Dee began the production of her new movie, Tammy and the Doctor, Darin began acting overly suspicious every time Dee spent some time with her co-star, Peter Fonda. In 1963, Darin could no longer shake off the feeling that his wife was having an affair. He acted up and told her he wanted a divorce, telling Dee the nonsensical reason behind his decision. She was furious and disappointed. She repeatedly denied the claims, eventually convincing Darin to rethink his accusations. After almost breaking up, the couple finally felt like they needed to put some effort into their relationship. Darin began to commit all his time to being a good father and an easygoing husband, but his jealousy kept rearing its ugly head. On one occasion, he lost his mind over the fact that Dee talked to Warren Beatty at a party. Darin didn't know what to do or how to fix his jealousy problem, so he took the easy way out. He wasn't bold enough to face Dee himself, so he had his psychiatrist tell her that he wanted out. And just like that, they separated for good. And then began the hardest year of Darin's life, 1968. 1968 started off as a very busy year for Darin. He became active in politics and worked on Robert F. Kennedy's presidential campaign. Kennedy and Darin developed a very close friendship. Darin considered Kennedy his hero and one of the main reasons he got more involved in politics. Soon after, Kennedy became the main reason for his grief. Darin was travelling with Kennedy and was one of the last people who saw him before his assassination. Darin threw himself into recording new music while trying to shake off the trauma of losing Bobby Kennedy. He was so troubled by Kennedy's death that reportedly he stayed with his coffin all night on the eve of his burial. The same year Darin lost Kennedy, he learned something jaw-dropping about his own past. He discovered his family's wildest secret. His mother, Nina, was just 17 years old when she had him, and to cover up her teen pregnancy, she passed him off as her younger brother. Darin grew up believing his grandmother was his mother. Nina finally confessed, sending Darin into a tailspin. This revelation devastated him. There were so many unanswered questions, namely, who was his father? Unfortunately, he never got a satisfactory answer. Even though he worked tirelessly to live with it, Darin's heart was very fragile, and he'd been frail since childhood. As time passed, his heart got weaker and weaker, but his divorce was the last nail in the coffin. By the 1970s, Darin's health was not doing well. He felt alone and miserable, so he went crawling back to Sandra D. His ex-wife saw him getting sicker by the day, and despite their turbulent past, she couldn't leave him alone like that. In 1970, however, Darin found love for the second time. This time she went by the name of Andrea Yeager, and unlike Dee, she wasn't a world-class actress, but a humble secretary. Even Darin's friends said that she was a stand-up person who didn't want anything from Bobby, and Darin fell head over heels in love with her. After a year filled with medicine and dire side effects, Darin's doctors finally told him that he needed heart surgery. In January 1971, he underwent an artificial valve implant, a painful surgery with a long recovery period. When he opened his eyes, he began the next chapter of his life, trying to heal his broken heart. Darin began performing again, and Yeager was there whenever he felt bad. Reportedly, Darin was often administered oxygen during or after he performed, but he kept performing, and Yeager kept helping him. Her devotion was undeniable, and it influenced Darin to give love another shot. In the summer of 1973, the two made their wedding vows and became husband and wife. But if Darin thought he'd found his happily ever after, he was wrong. Only 4 months later, Darin's worsening health worsened his relationship. Andrea had reached the end of her rope, and in October, the fairy tale romance came to an end and they divorced. Only 37 years old, Darin was a divorced man for the second time, but fate had another horrible twist in store for him. The same year, Darin made a mistake that led to some serious consequences. When he had a dental appointment in 1973, he failed to take his antibiotics, which protected his heart. This caused an overwhelming systemic infection and weakened his heart to very dangerous levels. Due to sepsis, he ended up in the hospital. On December 11th, 1973, Darin scheduled another hazardous heart surgery. Sadly, this second operation wasn't as successful as the one he'd had in 1971. Bobby Darin never woke up. Only 37 years old, the musician died in the recovery room. It seemed like tragedy followed Darin wherever he went, even after his death. In 2008, it was reported that in a fire at Universal Studios, Darin's work, among hundreds of other artists, was destroyed. Dodd Darin got involved in a musical project to commemorate his father. The musical, called Dream Lover, the Bobby Darin musical, aimed to delve deeper into Darin's problematic relationships. More importantly, it gave Darin and his human side the recognition he deserved. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos.